Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Backlog Battle Podcast. This is Alex. In case this is the first time you're listening or watching the show, we're basically talking to gamers from all walks of life and to find their passions and really thinking about what drives them to create the content that they make every single day. And of course, this week we have Matt, aka DJ Stormageddon, and we kind of encountered each other on Twitter when I think I kind of forgot the exact circumstances, but I remember you reaching out to me and I was like, okay, cool, this guy sounds interesting. And then I looked at your Twitter profile and literally I was like, you have so many podcasts, way more than me. not that I have anything to say about that. I used to have 7 or something at one point. But welcome to the show, and I'm glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was after your Status Chance episode aired.
Right.
Status and I connected on Twitter, and so I listened to that episode. I was like, oh, this is a really cool show, and then listened to some of the backlog and reached out. I was like, oh, I'd love to be on the show, and been listening since. Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Do you know Status in real life, or was that the first time you guys interacted?
So we've been interacting through Twitter for a while, but I've not yet met Status in person. But I think it was probably Mass Effect that brought us together. I feel like that brings a lot of my Twitter friendships together. But yeah, we've just been in conversation on and off on Twitter, and then he shared the episode he did with you, and I gave it a listen. Because I'm always looking for new podcasts. Lord knows I have too many to listen to at this point, but I'm always looking for new ones because I like to hear what other voices are out there, and yours really caught my attention. You're a really great seasoned interviewer. And so it was really a blast to listen to.
Yeah. I always tell my guests that I have Oprah to thank for that. Because and I will say that I've never truly expected at this point in my life to basically say, oh yeah, Oprah helped me, figure out my interview style. But here we are, what is it, 300 and something odd episodes technically of this show and still going. Which kind of reminds me, you've been podcasting for quite a while now, haven't you?
I have almost a decade at this point, more or less. My oldest podcast is no longer active, but it was called Crash Chords. It was a music review podcast I hosted with 2 co-hosts, and we often had a guest sometimes. And every episode we reviewed a new album. We broke it down track by track, what we liked about it, and then usually talked about something to do with the music industry after that. The episodes were fairly long. We did 251 episodes in total before it went on hiatus. But that was my introduction to podcasting, was doing this music review show. And along the early days of that show, I also decided, hey, I like all these comedians who do these interview shows. I could do an interview show. How hard could it be? Turns out it's not easy at all, but I started doing it, and so that's how Crash Chords Autographs was born. Now transitioned to CPOV Autographs at the Certain Point of View Podcast Network with a bunch of other shows that I do. But that is now my currently longest running show, and it is a interview show, not too unlike this, but it's less connected to just video games and more just the arts in general. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been doing this a long time, and it kind of blows my mind how long I've been doing it, to be honest, when I think about it. It doesn't feel real a little bit.
Doesn't it? It's kind of interesting because, I've been doing podcasts since 2009. I was part of that generation that got inspired by Leo Laporte. No, I wasn't one of those people in the modern days where, somebody just comes up and say hey, you have a podcast? Because everybody got one. No, dude,
right.
This podcast, this specific podcast, the Backlog Battle Podcast, has had 7 seasons before it with 7 different names. There's a reason why it still exists to this day, and now in an interview podcast form. And I had a point, but let's just roll with it and not talk about it.
It's all good.
But, I've enjoyed talking to you so much, even just for the past few minutes, that I have to kind of bring this back to video games before we get really into the nitty gritty of the podcasting stuff, because I'm really interested in that as well. So how did you get into video games?
Oh, what a good question. And I knew this question was coming because I am a fan of the show.
Yay.
So my earliest memory of video games is when my brother got a new Nintendo. I got his hand-me-down Atari 2600. Yes, I'm old. Don't do the math. And the first game I remember playing on my Atari 2600 was a game called Mousetrap. For those who don't know what Mousetrap is, Google it. But it is an Atari game that was essentially a bootleg Pac-Man where you control a mouse trying to get cheese and eat little pellets. and you're trying to escape cats. But otherwise, it's the same layout as Miss Pac-Man or Pac-Man.
Wow.
And so that's my earliest gaming memory, the first game I remember playing. The game that probably got me into video games is not going to be any stranger to you or some of your previous guests, but it is the Mega Man games.
Of course.
When I first got my Nintendo, it of course came with the combo Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers cartridge. But the first game I bought with my own money was Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3. I think they had both been out already by the time I got my Nintendo. I played them endlessly on loop. I got Mega Man 4 as soon as it came out. I remember when Mega Man 6 was released on the Nintendo, like it was this big deal, the first like new Mega Man that you get the day it came out. So yeah, I would say that Mega Man is the series that brought me into gaming. I've since expanded my repertoire and played a ton of different things, but the Mega Man franchise, especially those early days, is what like really got me into video games.
That's really awesome. And I remember, before, and I'll be really open to our audience, before I lost the audio and the video for the show prior to this, you and I were even talking about how you found a commonality between me and a previous guest. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yes. So your last full-length interview that you did on the show, the guest's name escapes me, but you'll fill that in for me. You were talking with the guest about how you created your own Robot Masters. And I damn near threw my coffee when I was listening to this. It was like, oh my God, somebody else besides me created their own Robot Masters? I thought that was so cool. I used to do that all the time. I did it in the era of the later Nintendo Mega Man games. And I came up with all these wild kinds of Robot Masters, both male and female characters. Yes. I don't even remember the names of any of them off the top of my head, but I used to sketch them in my notebook. Mm-hmm. I was obsessed with the Robot Masters from Mega Man because they were like, Mega Man was cool, but like Proto Man and the Robot Masters were really cool. All the time, they had these different designs. Proto Man had sunglasses, which automatically made him cooler. I was obsessed with creating them, and it was so funny to hear on that episode that you and your guest also created your own Robot Masters.
I know. It makes me wonder how many of us are out there,
right?
Like, if for anybody who is listening to this or like watching this, if you've created Robot Masters, hit me up on Twitter at My Backlog Battle, because I want to hear from you, because this blows my mind. Like, I came into that episode with no expectations whatsoever that we were even going to talk about making Robot Masters. Although, honestly, I should have done my due diligence as a guest, because Michael Solosi, who is the guest that you're talking about, right. Yeah. His literal like Twitter icon is Mega Man. And I'm like, yeah, well, that makes a lot of freaking sense right there. So for Mega Man, like, I mean, obviously the NES had like a lot of really good series, and for me, like, Mega Man is certainly one of them. Were there any other series that kind of called to you that you could say like is, some of your favorites from that era?
Sure. I would say if I can lump the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo together a bit, like for the Nintendo, it was definitely Super Mario Brothers. It was definitely Mega Man. I had Metroid and the first two Zelda games, but I was terrible at both of them. Like, they were very hard, and so I didn't get as into them until the Super Nintendo. But I'd say the first two games that really like opened my mind for video gaming in the Super Nintendo generation were Chrono Trigger, which is to this day my favorite RPG ever made and one of my favorite games ever made.
Awesome.
And Super Mario RPG. Super Mario RPG, I had been a Mario fan for a long time. I loved Super Mario World. But then when I played Super Mario RPG, I was like, wait, you could do a Mario game where he's not just going to the right? I don't understand. Super Mario RPG has some of the best combat, characters, music, graphics at the time in gaming. But to this day, Chrono Trigger will always be what started my love of RPGs. Chrono Trigger and the original Game Boy Pokemon games are like what launched my love of RPGs, which has long lived on and evolved. And Chrono Trigger to this day I still think is one of the most dynamic and most brilliant written RPGs because of how diverse the endings are, the different choices you can make. And at a time when you weren't really making choices in games, you could make choices. You could decide to recruit or kill a character that was originally a villain. Like, it was unheard of at the time, and so many games since then haven't done stuff like that. So yeah, I would say that generation and those series opened me up to. Then of course I became obsessed with Final Fantasy and all all of the from that Super Nintendo era is when those series evolved, and then even beyond for like Zelda and Mario also started in the Super Nintendo era. Like I loved Super Metroid. I've beaten that so many times. I love Link to the Past is one of my favorite Zelda games. The only one I think I love more than it is the 3DS sequel. What was that one? Link Between Worlds? Link Between Worlds. But yeah, I think for me, the longest running series that I now love and have been such a fan of really got started for me as a big game fan was on the Super Nintendo.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Let's go a little bit back on like Chrono Trigger, because that is a beloved RPG. Like, and you can technically say, I guess it's a series. You have Radical Dreamers for the disc system, and then Chrono Cross. But really, when people talk about the Chrono games, they're really just talking about Chrono Trigger. What made you kind of gravitate towards that game? And even looking back, or even like now after, like so many years, like, is it still a game that you'd want to replay through like on a regular basis? Like, what is the relationship of this game to you?
So that's a great question. So I can't actually take credit for Chrono Trigger. It wasn't of my own design to want to play it. My friend Roy, who I grew up with, who I haven't talked to in quite a long time, but we were young. He was a friend of mine. He lived with his grandmother. They were Filipino, and like they were very much about like family and community. I'd always hang out with him and his cousins and his sister, and we'd always have dinner together. It was like a really sweet, close knit family. And we were really close, and I would always borrow games from him. And one of the first games he lent me was Chrono Trigger, because I had no idea. He asked me if I'd played any RPGs, and I went, "What's an RPG?" And he's like, "Oh my god!" It's like, "Have you ever played Chrono Trigger? I know you like Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff and time travel." I was like, "No, what's Chrono Trigger?" And he's like, "You just have to borrow this game. You have a Super Nintendo, right? Great, borrow this game, play it, and then bring it back to me." And I just fell in love with it. It was a lot of things. I mean, what initially interested me is I was a Dragon Ball Z fan. That's how me and Roy became friends. And so like Akira Toriyama doing all the artwork for that game is what led me to be interested in the design of it. But then, just playing it and seeing how forgiving it was to new players. But once you understood the game and started doing the New Game Plus stuff and got the hang of it, you could do so many different things with those characters and the builds. And yeah, I fell for it, and it's all thanks to my friend Roy. Roy, shout out to you if you're still out there listening. But then, as far as your question about do I still play it now, I would say that up until 2 years ago, I used to play Chrono Trigger every year at least once. It started out, I had it on the Super Nintendo, of course, and then when I got rid of my Super Nintendo like an idiot, I got the PlayStation version, the Anthologies version, which I played regularly, and then once it came, that version was re-released on the 3DS, or the DS rather, I bought that version, and that's the current version I have. I've not pulled the trigger on the terrible PC version. I'm kind of holding out hope that it'll come to the Switch at some point. 2D HD remake.
Yes.
But that said, I have it on my 3DS, and yeah, up until a few years ago, I used to play it every year. I'd at least play through the game once. I would either start a New Game Plus save from one I had previously, or start a brand new save. The last couple of years, I haven't been able to play, just things ramping up, doing more streaming, doing more podcasting. I haven't had as much time for older games. He says I unironically playing through the Legendary Edition of Mass Effect currently, But yeah, I played it regularly and constantly. I own the 3-disc Japanese import soundtrack from it, which actually comes with a plastic paper print of the original map from the game. I have the full track list, and I listen to it pretty regularly. Chrono Trigger is one of the few games that has impacted my life and my love of gaming in a way that I can't attribute to very many other games.
Wow, that's really huge. That's a huge deal. Can you imagine, though, if they made an HD 2D version of that game?
I want it. Give me the Octopath Traveler version of it. Especially now that they just announced that they're doing that Dragon Quest 3, a game that I've never played, and so I'm going to be excited to play that for the first time. But like, I loved Octopath Traveler. I know it didn't resonate with a lot of folks, but I liked the choices. I liked that it was, you had so many characters. I understand that it did feel kind of meandery, but I didn't mind because it looked and sounded so beautiful, and the voice acting was so good. And And so, yeah, I want more games like that. If they ever gave me a Chrono Trigger in that style, I'd be over the moon.
Yeah.
Because I want more from Chrono Trigger, and Chrono Cross doesn't count. I owe myself to give it another chance. I played it the one time and I hated it when it came out. I do want to replay it at some point to give it another chance. I just haven't got my hands on a copy. But Chrono Trigger is the game in that series. The other games, I never played the Disk System game, and I didn't like Chrono Cross. So like that's my game. And if I could get a remake of that, I would love it. Give it to me. I want it.
if you do play through like Chrono Cross and stuff, like I do highly recommend a few videos to kind of learn the connection between both Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger, because really, like, when you go and play Chrono Cross, the art style difference is so jarring that it really kind of almost distances itself from the original source material. And I think that's part of my issue when I played it back in the day too, because I was like, this doesn't look anything like Chrono Trigger. Like, how is this connected? And even Radical Dreamers and stuff, which was the disc one, it was just like it even played differently from the other two, you know? And so, you know, I definitely recommend on that route. So, you know, that being said, like, I am kind of curious where your interest in music kind of came from, because, you know, I know that Chrono Trigger has like such a fantastic soundtrack by Yasunori Mitsuda and stuff. Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if there's any connection between your love of music with the music that you've experienced in games, because Mega Man had a great soundtrack, and of course Chrono Trigger has a great soundtrack. There's got to be a connection here.
So I will say that my interest in music and pop music specifically came from my father. I was raised on listening to a huge variety of music. My dad listened to everything from pop to Motown to hip hop to rock to like literally anything. And so my love of music, my core love of music, came from that. But my evolution of love of music can actually be attributed to a website that you may remember called overclockremix.com.
Yeah. Yes.
For those who are not familiar, overclockremix.com, which is a website I believe still exists, it was a place where mixers and people who liked making music could take video game music and remix it and upload it at no cost. There was no cost to download. It was no cost to upload. It was free for everybody, so there was no copyright issues. And I listened to so much Mega Man and Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy and Metroid music remixed on that site. And that opened my eyes to dubstep and trance and all these other genres of dance music that I wasn't that familiar with, but these DJs were making those kinds of songs with this video game music. Beyond that, my biggest branch to loving video game music within popular culture is I listen to a lot of nerdcore hip hop. For those who aren't familiar, nerdcore hip hop is a variety of artists who rap about video games, TV, movies, nerdy things, essentially. And one of the most popular, arguably one of the most popular ones right now, the incredible Mega Ran, who started his career rapping over Mega Man music, Raheem, who is an incredible human, just put out a book, a friend of mine who I adore. When I started hearing his stuff, and MC Frontalot and a few other rappers who are using beats mixed with 8-bit and 16-bit MIDI music, I was like, you can do this? This is a way to make music? It blew my mind. And I made it an obsession to try and find out and find all of that kind of music. And I've discovered an incredible amount of artists through that. And my love of music and gaming grew together, and what led me to become a DJ. I've been DJing for almost as long as I've been podcasting. Obviously not currently during the pandemic. There's not been a lot, though. I've been able to DJ with the help of Fuser and Harmonix. Fuser, an incredible game. I've been a featured streamer for Fuser and Harmonix for many months now, and I Twitch stream at least once a week. And that's been a real cool way to reincorporate and bring music and video games back around to a kind of like a focal point. Because, of course, I like growing up a music nerd, I loved Guitar Hero when it first came out. Like, it's the best of both worlds. I can pretend to play guitar because I can't actually play guitar and geek out about music. And it only grew when Rock Band came out, and then I could sing or play drums also. There is definitely an overlap over the years from starting back with old school music to what I love now. And since then, like I said, I had a music podcast, and like I've been obsessed with music. Audio is almost more important to me than any other medium.
Hmm.
Not always. Like, I love video games, I love movies and TV, but if I can't hear it, if
Yeah.
I can't hear the music, like, I lose something. Like, some of my favorite movies ever are ones that have incredible soundtracks that are iconic. Movies like Birds of Prey and Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Movies that, like,
yes.
you can picture each scene as you hear the songs. Like, that's how and it's the same thing with Chrono Trigger. Like, if you show me the Millennial Fair, I hear the music in my head. If I'm fighting Gato, I hear his music. Like, I'm so intrinsically tied with moments in music, and video games absolutely started that journey for me.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really cool. And, you know, to your point about like Fuser and stuff like that, I actually saw some of the tweets for the Fuser game, like Twitter and stuff. I was about to like say the entire like handle. I'm like, that's silly. Like, it's just a Fuser Twitter handle. And to your point, like, you know, music escapes me. I know when I listen to good music, and in some ways, I can actually identify certain sequences of notes that I can tell like is going to be pleasant for a lot of people or something like that. I don't, you know, even now trying to talk about music is a struggle for me, but like, you know, my experience with something like that, you know, apart from Overclock Remix, I went there as well. Like, it's a great website. Like, I still go there from time to time too. So to your point, yes, it's still around. You know, like, I remember MTV, when they published games, they had this game. It's not really a game. It was called MTV Music Generator. And it was like a PlayStation game. And it just had samples. It had like a 15 track, you know, kind of sequencer kind of thing. And then you just kind of put, you know, random samples like on a track. And I was able to make music. And that was so great. And with the advent of, you know, with Guitar Hero, now you can literally play your music even if you don't know how to play the instruments. And Harmonix is such a great company because they're able to do that consistently ever since like the PS2 era. Like, think about that. They've been around since then for like Guitar Hero 1. And when Fuser was announced, which is kind of crazy because like I didn't actually learn of this game until like around maybe last year or something like that, when you know, when it was lead up to the release. And I hit up my friend from NCSoft, who, you know, I worked with at Sega. He's the PR guy there now. And I'm like, hey, so I heard you guys, of all people, are publishing this music game, which is odd because NCSoft is traditionally an MMO publisher. Like, oh yeah, we're publishing this game called Fuser. You want to check it out? I'm like, well, yeah, I want to check it out. And the experience that I had was like really intriguing because here I am playing with like full songs, like licensed songs, and not just like trying to match beats to a track like DJ Hero, but I'm literally creating melodies in such a, no pun intended, harmonious way that it makes me feel like, oh, I can freaking do this. Obviously, that's going to be really hard to try to do it in real life, but like, how did that first experience of playing this game feel to you? Because you're obviously a DJ. You've been around the block. So, like, how did that feel for you? That whole thing of like making music using this game.
So it's funny, you talk about how it feels like this game came out of nowhere, and it sort of did. Like, I've been following Harmonix for a long time, and I was at PAX East before the world shut down last year, and like, I had no idea they had a new game, and then I walk into the expo hall, and there's this giant golden angel with a DJ turntable in front of it, and I'm like, what is this? And shout out to my friend Matthew Finneman from the podcast Super Deluxe Gamescast. I was walking around with him on the floor, and he's like, oh, well, I sort of have a connection with Harmonix. Like, I'm supposed to be talking to them. Come with me, and we'll chat with them. We'll see if maybe we can get you to try the game. And long story short, he did, and I did. And you want to know how it felt to play this game? Holding the controller in my hand and learning the basics, it felt like a third limb. Like, it felt so natural to do the mixing. And I will say, I don't do a lot of live mixing. A lot of it is automated for the DJ sets that I've done. I don't have digital turntables yet, at least. But like, just my knowledge of music, my knowledge of the songs, and what each stem, because each stem of the song has a symbol, whether it's guitar or bass or keyboard or microphone for the vocals, whatever, sound machine for anything else. But pulling those bits out and making these songs felt so natural.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't just because of my knowledge, it's because of how well the game works and how the game is designed to blend those tracks. You can make some truly horrendous sounding stuff if you want to, and trust me, I have. You can ask any of my followers, I have. But it is so brilliantly designed that as long as you're trying and you're looking and you're experimenting, you will make an endless amount of original music using these pieces. It's astonishing to me. I stream almost once a week, and I've been doing it probably since January.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't think I've heard the same two songs unless I save a snapshot and play something intentionally the same. It's really wild, and they keep releasing two to three new songs every week. Mm-hmm. They've released free songs and loop sets from the characters in the game. Like, it's wild. Yeah, it's absolutely astonishing. I had played their board game version of a drop mix, which had cards that you would put down and it would mix tracks, which was a precursor to this. But like, I've never experienced a game like this, because what I loved Rock Band and I loved Guitar Hero, but like Rock Band, which is, let's say, the penultimate version of Guitar Hero, right? It was the first to incorporate all the instruments. Mm-hmm. Like, that was designed to still just play the existing music. There wasn't really a creative aspect to it. Yeah. Fuser takes that logic and then expands it to allow you to create yourself. Mm-hmm. You're no longer, you can just play the entire song and just listen to a section of a song, or you can change it up and make your own music. They also give you instrument discs where you can create your own loops. Like, it's a tool. And I actually have intent within the next year to find a way to perform live using Fuser. Wow. Doing live shows or incorporating. I have friends who are musicians who are good improvisers who want to incorporate a live show. Like, I don't know what form it's going to take yet. I'm still trying to figure that out. But my plan is sometime in the next year to find a way to take my Nintendo Switch, plug it into my my multi-mixer, and just hook it up to my giant speakers and DJ using this game, because it's such a versatile tool, and it only gets more versatile as more music comes out for it.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the thing that I love about it, because like when they launched, it's literally like, hey, I think it was like, I'm getting the price wrong, maybe like, $25 or $50 for like 40 or 47 tracks or something like that, which to me was insane, because it's like, the game itself already comes with a lot of songs, but out off the gate, they're like, well, you can buy them individually, or here's a massive payout so you can just get everything. And for the life of me, it kind of reminded me of like, when Rock Band came out, like all the song packs, and I'm like, but at the same time, like the a la carteness of the DLC of these games allows you to really kind of explore how far you can take some of these songs. And for the people who have never played the game, what's actually very interesting about the way that the game is structured is if you go and do the campaign, so to speak, where you're going through the different stages and all that stuff, they're slowly unlocking more features over and over. And, eventually, I forget what stage I'm in right now, but it gets so complex in a good way that you can literally, like, you get to the point where you're literally making original music almost, pretty much. And I absolutely cannot fathom how Harmonix was able to achieve something like this, especially being a huge fan myself of their work. I remember when I first saw Fuser, I was like, I'm interested in this game, but in a very different way than I like something like DJ Hero, because DJ Hero is a very traditional kind of Guitar Hero style game with notes, and there's like the balance knob or whatever, but like it's different. Right? You are literally creating your songs. And what's also really fascinating about this game that I really truly love is that it has a strong community aspect where every week there's a new challenge. Even if you're not a seasoned mixer, you have just as much of a chance as everybody else to get your work out there. And I love that. Like, there was a time when my wife and I like submitted some of our tracks and stuff, and I was really sad because you can only submit one, but it is what it is. It's like we wanted to submit more because we were that much into the game. So I want to ask then, so how did you get hooked up with DJing for the Fuser account? Because that's really freaking cool, man.
So, I mean, what I can say is that I can really thank Fuser and Harmonix and the head of their social media account. Shout out to Zoe, who is just a rock star, who makes sure that there are a ton of incredible DJs, make sure that the community's heard, make sure that people who want to be a part of Fuser can be a part of Fuser. And I should make it clear that most of the streamers streaming this game are folks with a couple hundred followers. There are larger accounts streaming it as well and who are part of the community, but like they really want to build up and boost up dedicated DJs regardless of your following. It has nothing to do with, are you a popular streamer? It has to do with, do you love this game and do you want to stream it? And like what's really also lovely is that they are engaging the community in a way where they want them to be at the forefront of all the things coming. Like, I can say now that I got a sneak peek of the Diamond Stage before it released, which is now out. I got to give feedback on stuff. I've taken surveys on stuff. I'm like, I don't think I'm out of line to say this. Like, they've just been really looking to incorporate the folks playing this game the most, and I really appreciate that. And they feature people on their Twitter account. They retweet people who are streaming. They host their live streams. Like, it's really cool. And you hit the nail on the head before. I think you were talking about how this game is different and you weren't quite sure how. It's different because the other games were all skill games. Even Rock Band, it's about a score and a skill. But what I love about Fuser is besides the campaign and besides competitive mode, there are no scores and skills. It's you DJ the way you want to. What I love about them teaching you how to use all the tools is that after you've learned everything in the campaign, if you don't want to use half of those tools anymore, you don't have to. You can use whatever tools you think suit you best. And free play or the Diamond Stage or co-op, none of that makes you have to hit a certain beat, or people can make requests and stuff and you can fulfill them, but if you miss them, you don't fail anything. There's no fail state. And that's what makes this beyond just a skill game. And it's a skill game that also wants you to create, and creation is the focus, which I think is a first for Harmonix. A lot of their other games are very much skill based because that's how you gamify this stuff. This game allows you to gamify it by just using the tool, not necessarily because you need to get the high score. And I love that.
And I think that's kind of, a credit to their design ethos and how it's evolved over time, because for one thing, I was personally wondering like how the campaign was going to work, because I'm a plebe when it comes to music, so I'm like, how do you quantify and score creativity? You know what I mean? And then when I played it and they start doing things like, hey, put this song on the downbeat, and I'm like, okay, well, that's familiar. That's like the skill part of it. But even then, your job is still to create an interesting melody, an interesting song to build up your score, which in a way subconsciously makes you want to be creative, because how are you going to get that score? You need to kind of experiment and use all the tools that they give you. So it's almost like an interesting method to nudge you to explore your creativity as a musician, even if you never had one. And I personally love this game because my wife loves music. And so when I presented the game to her, like, she was making remixes as if she's been doing it for a long time, but she's just kind of, doing it from the perspective of, well, I love music. And I think that's at the core of every Harmonix game, is their love of music. Like, I'm not going to be ashamed to say, like, I also did Dance Central, like, on the original on the Xbox 360. And even then, like, I had a very similar question of, like, how do you quantify the creativity with dancing? I mean, sure, it's posing and stuff like that, but like, how do you even think of designing a game around music? Which, of course, it came back thanks to Oculus and stuff like that. It's Dance Central is back. So Harmonix is a great company, I guess, is what I'm saying, and I'm happy that they're back in some way, and I hope they find future success again, with or without plastic instruments, I would say.
Right. Like I loved Rock Band and I love playing it, but the idea that I can play this wherever I want, either the Steam version, which is what I used to stream with, or just on my Switch sitting in my bed with a pair of headphones on, like I love that kind of non-peripheral necessariness to it.
Yeah, totally. So you're also a streamer in addition to being a podcaster. How did you discover streaming?
So I discovered streaming mostly just through knowledge of the platform and a few other friends who were streaming at the time in the early days of Twitch. And I toyed with it and I messed around with it, but it didn't really catch on for me initially because I don't know, I just put this pressure on myself to have to play a game from beginning to end. I can't abandon games. I have to have a through line and a narrative. And I burned out on it, and so I stopped for a long time. And then it's probably 2 or 3 years ago now, I went to MagFest. I think it was MagFest 2019. It was I think it was MagFest 2019. I went to an incredible panel with a couple of panelists who I'm still huge fans of. Urban Bohemian, Cypher of Tyr, and Imperial were all panelists at this panel. And talking about what it's like to be a streamer, and it's not everything that it seems like. It is a lot of hard work, and here's how you can get started, and the kinds of things you can do, and the kinds of content you can make. And I was at the time when I was burned out. I asked Tanya, Cypher of Tyr specifically, "Hey, what do you do if you're burned out or don't want to stream?" And she looked at me and said, "Then you don't stream." I was like, "Really? It's that simple?" She's like, "Yeah, you make the rules. You have She said to me, you have to assume that if people are turning up, they're turning up to watch you, right? They're your followers. If they're turning up to watch you and you're not feeling streaming, then maybe just do an IRL and chat with them for a bit, or tell them that you don't feel like it, or stream something else. You control the narrative, you control the stream, create the stream that you want to do, because at the end of the day, you have to have fun doing it. That's got to be first and foremost." And that kind of broke my brain. It seems obvious, but hearing it from someone kind of really set things in perspective. And so after that, I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll try starting to stream this one game. And then, I started playing some indie games that I could finish on stream, and then moving from game to game. And then when Reignite got started up and that community was really active, I had never finished Dragon Age Inquisition, so I decided to go back and stream that game from beginning to end. And a lot of the folks who listen to that podcast are, of course, BioWare fans, were like, "Oh, we want to watch you play this game," and started engaging. And then kind of just word of mouth, things start to build. And since then it's been great. Like last October, during the pandemic, I decided to play scary games, which I hate. I'm terrible at scary games, and I'm a coward. But I'd had Dead Space 1 and 2 for ages and never played them. So I played them with an audience, and it was so much fun to be scared with other people. And I ended up loving Dead Space 1 and 2. Dead Space 3, not so much. That's another story. Then I started playing Fire Emblem on stream, and then I played Hades on stream. Now I'm currently doing Fuser, and I'm in between other games. And what I learned was, and what brought me and made me love streaming, is it's a community of people who I am like-minded with, who really want to just hang out and watch me play something. And I grew up watching my friends play games and playing games in large groups together, and so it felt very natural to me. And I'm no expert streamer, I'm just under 400 followers, and that's incredible to me. I can't believe that many people watch. To me, that's a gigantic number. But I just love doing it. As long as people want to keep watching, I'm going to keep doing it. Some of my favorite experiences, I had never played Journey before on PS3. And so when it was on PS Plus and I had yet to play it, I did a Sunday afternoon stream. I just started at 2:00 and played it straight through for 3 hours while folks hung out, and just beat the game because it's a short game.
Yeah.
It was magical. It's such a magical, beautiful. First of all, if you've never played Journey, go play it right now. Immediately play that game. It's one of the most gorgeous and beautiful games I've ever played. I cried at the end. It was just such a great game. But those kinds of pocket experiences where I can just hang out with some folks and stream and chat and hang out, it's been really great, and not something I probably would have gotten as hard into if not for the pandemic, but I'm grateful for it now because I love my community, and my streaming community has helped grow my podcast community. My podcast community has helped grow my stream community. It all feeds into itself, and it's been really great.
Yeah. I've always believed that adversity hardens the person and stuff, and sometimes even the the most difficult of situations forces you to really flex that creative muscle. And, like I remember back when I was in school and stuff, especially in this day and age where some of the creative arts are getting cut out of school programs and stuff. Like, I remember back when I was young, I didn't really understand the value of creativity and stuff like that, like, being in an art program or a music program. But then when those things started getting taken out, I started kind of really lamenting at my stance and kind of realizing that being able to think in the abstract is just as important as being able to think in the logic sense. And I think you kind of nailed it in the head, because like, especially with your experience of getting burnt out, like, yeah, like, why should you keep going if you're burnt out? You obviously stop. And I think that kind of line of thinking where it seems obvious, but it's still kind of abstracted, it kind of reminds me of those situations when we were young, when we'd pull a friend over and say like, hey, how do I ask this girl or guy out? And your friend is like, you ask them out.
You just say the words.
Yeah. Just and it's that kind of reaction. And I'm glad that you were able to get that insight, and especially finding this community online and stuff, because honestly, like, especially with the pandemic, we're all kind of siloed in our own houses. I'm so happy to hear that you've found so many people, or people have found you through Fuser or through games that you're playing online. And I can only imagine how much fun that Dead Space playthrough was, because Dead Space is, I agree with you, the first two are like some of my favorites. 3, we'll just throw that out the door, that sort of thing. And to share my experience with scary games, because I did used to stream like a few years ago. My October game was Outlast, and I had no idea what Outlast was all about, right? Yeah. And I kid you not, like, instead of being terrified, I made fun of the game from the very beginning to the very end, and it became a comedy stream, to the point where somebody rated me and they're like, oh, I don't want to stay because it's scary. The person who rated me stayed, like, beyond, like, when they were signing off, because they were like laughing so hard, like, I had like 100 people there like laughing at it. I'm like, what's happening? Like, I'm just literally just and I think you kind of captured that magic of being in a community, because like, what is Twitch? People older than us don't know the answer to that question. And for me, the best answer that I can give somebody is like, well, remember when my friend Robert or my friend JR like would hang out on the couch, like would play video games on, in the same house together? It's that, but with thousands more people.
Yeah, completely.
That being said, though, like, with so many talents, like, being a streamer, being a musician, being a podcaster, it's really overwhelming to have somebody like you on the show, because like, a lot of people out there who listen to the show sometimes think like, oh, I can't do anything, or rather, I have so many things that I have to do instead of pursuing something creative. Do you have any words to say to them to kind of encourage them to pursue passions that are beyond going to their 9-to-5 job, or just going to school or classes and stuff like that, or just, and not to disparage video games. Video games are fantastic, but on top of that, to pursue something that they've never tried before?
So this is a great question, and I've been asked it before, and it's always a daunting question to answer, right? Because it's very it felt easy for me to pursue this stuff, but it's also because I was driven to do it. But it wasn't always easy. But I'd say I think the best advice I can give is to just do it, whatever it is. What do I mean by that? Because that's obviously a very simple answer. A lot of the things that I do, I feel drawn to doing, but I was an expert in absolutely and completely none of them when I started. Mm-hmm. I was not, like I said, if you really want to go back to the first 25 episodes of Autographs, you'll hear how not good at it I am. Like, I will say that most of my shows that I've co-hosted with, because I had them to balance me out, we kind of hit the ground running. Most of those shows start out pretty good, but all of them evolve. Everything you do evolves. All the work you do evolves. No matter what, nobody on this planet who has a passion starts amazing, with very minor exceptions. There are prodigies everywhere, sure. I have a friend, Robert, who I adore with my whole heart, who's a prodigy, and it makes me hate him sometimes because he can literally play any instrument. He's good at everything. It's annoying. But barring the Roberts of the world, prodigies aren't that common. It takes time to work at stuff. And more important than skill, or accessibility or money or any of that stuff, although a lot of that stuff to a degree is required, is absolutely patience and time.
Mhm.
You know, I was not an expert podcaster when I started. I would dare say I'm not now, even with all the work I'm doing, but I've learned a lot. And same with streaming. And like, I'm beyond an expert streamer. There are so many other streamers out there who have better shows, better interfaces, are funnier, are smarter, whatever. But I'm dedicated to the craft and I keep working at it. You know, same with music. Like, I've been DJing a long time, but I've only been mixing recently. And, you know, most of my live event DJing was based on burlesque shows and other events and live events, like all born out of something. But those skills were entry points. My friend asking me to hit play on a playlist for him at a live show was the entry point for me to get my own soundboard, get my own speakers, start DJing live events on my own, start DJing friends' weddings, things like that. Like, there's a starting point for everything. And you can't look at the end goal. You can't have the goalposts 50 years down the line. You need to set short goals that are accomplishable that you can then readjust after you've accomplished them. Because at the end of the day, if you make realistic goals that you can achieve, once you achieve them, you'll feel good. And then you can continue to push forward to achieve even better. Be kind to yourself and set realistic expectations, and you will go very far.
I think that's well said. And, you know, the interesting thing is, like, every episode I try to find a common point with my guests. And obviously the Mega Man thing is a hand-me-down, you know, like, you literally told it to me. But the thing that kind of caught my attention during that whole during your whole speech, for the lack of a better term, was like the burlesque thing. Because I used to have friends, you know, in LA that were, well, they still are. They're still doing burlesque there. And so, you know, I had a late 20s, you know, kind of youth thing, like in my 30s. And that's when I used to hang out with a lot of burlesque dancers and stuff. And, you know, they did, in LA, they did the Stargirls burlesque show. So it's like a Star Wars themed burlesque show. So that's very interesting to hear from you. So I think that's really awesome, actually. So one of the things that I started doing recently is that I've asked guests to actually say something really encouraging to the next guest and actually also ask them a question. So today I actually have Dizzy Disaster, who is a streamer on Twitch. He does a lot of streaming of like Don't Starve and a whole bunch of other games like Terraria and stuff like that. And he has some choice words to say to you. So here he is.
Awesome.
Hi, Matt. This is Dizzy Disaster, or Ben. You can call me Ben. You are doing an awesome job with your podcast. I'm sure you are. And you represent New York. So I'm just outside of New York and Connecticut. So I kind of say that I'm from New York. And if you give up on this, you're going to let us all down. So you can't do that. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, just keep killing it, man. You look like you have a lot of people that actually really like your stuff. And once this is over, I'm actually going to check it out myself. I'm giving you a follow on Twitter right now so you can get a time frame on when this was recorded. This industry needs so many people from so many different viewpoints, and there's a niche for everything, and there's an interest in everything. And you look like you have something that you really, really, really enjoy and that you're really proud of. Multiple things. Just keep doing it. This is from somebody who hasn't even heard your stuff, but I can just tell by the amount of social media, the amount of posts, the amount of interaction that you have, that you really do care about what you're doing. It's easy to see that. For me, one of my biggest worries was when I first started this was I didn't want to, I was really careful about, you know, making sure that everybody felt comfortable and everything else. But we all come from completely different backgrounds and perspectives and different origin stories and everything else. So I guess my real question would be like, what is that motivating factor that keeps you going and logging into your stream every day and doing what you're doing? And what do you hope to have as a result of putting all this energy out into the world? Like, what is that goal? And I'm not talking about, I want to make the world a better place. I mean, we all obviously inevitably want to do that. But like, do you have like a moment where you're going to say, I've accomplished this? Like, do you want to get something published, like an LP, or do you want to have a stream with 1,000 viewers? Like, what is that moment that you paste in your brain and you look at that moment and you say, let's go. That's what I'm going for.
Well, Dizzy, thank you for that awesome question. Funny that, huh? We just had a whole conversation about this. It's like you know what you're doing, Alex. First of all, the one motivating thing, the one thing that keeps me going is a super easy answer. It's super cheesy, but it is my incredible spouse, Sarah Storm. I love my spouse so much, and she is always there for me when I've made a great accomplishment, when I've failed at something, when I'm sad, when I'm happy, when I'm burned out. She believes in me endlessly and just cares for me so deeply. That's what keeps me inspired. It's love, folks. It's cheesy. I'm sorry, but it's love. That's what keeps me going. When I was unemployed during the pandemic, she said, well, why don't you start streaming a couple days a week? See how that goes. And that's what snowballed into my now current streaming schedule. That's gotten less and more depending on the week. So easy answer for that first part. It's my incredible spouse, Sarah Storm. She's the best. As for my ultimate goal, that's such a great question because we just talked about that, right? Like I said, keep your goals simple. Does that mean I listen to my own advice? What do you think? You're an artist, so. No. But I will say that there were some goals. Like I wanted to get through the entire, my goal for Reignite was a podcast about Mass Effect. The goal was to get through the original trilogy, and we're almost there. We're going to go into Andromeda after that, which I've still never played, and I'm very excited to play for the first time for the show. Like, that's a giant accomplishment. 3 seasons, 3 full games, breaking it down mission by mission with guests. Unbelievable. A streaming goal, I'd love to get to 1,000 followers. I'm almost at 400 right now. If you're listening, please go follow me. I would appreciate it very much. DJ_Stormageddon, plus shameless plug. But 1,000 followers feels attainable, right? Like I have friends who have 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. All great, I'm sure. I just want 1,000. I want to see that 1K. I think that'd be really cool on Twitch. And I'm almost halfway there. So, we're on our way. Podcasting goals, it's hard to say. I can't start any more shows. I can't. Too many. But I'm so happy with Shut Up Evan. We talked about it a little bit in the episode that time forgot. But I love working with Evan Ross Katz. We've had such incredible, huge guests. And I already know our season 3 premiere, which I can't reveal yet, is our biggest guest yet. I'm not kidding. All-star caliber, big time guest. And so that's a really cool accomplishment. Here's an achievable goal. Here's one. I have a Mass Effect podcast. It's the one I've talked about the most. Yeah. Because it's the most focused fandom, right? Like Mass Effect fans are really ravenous for Mass Effect content, and I thank you for it. My goal is to someday get Mark Meer and or Jennifer Hale as guests on the podcast. I love them and I love their work. I've been a fan of them even besides Mass Effect. If I can get them on my Mass Effect podcast, that is a lofty goal that I hope to accomplish someday because they're both incredible humans who do incredible work. And it would be great to talk to them about a game that's meant so much to me and clearly means so much to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing about this show is that in this specific episode is that I'm a huge Mass Effect fan and we didn't even get to that part,
which didn't even get to it.
We definitely didn't. And that's kind of, I think, what's really magical about this show is that, every time it's almost over, we just leave the audience wanting a little bit more from the guest. And, from being a musician to being a fan of Mega Man and making Robot Masters, and of course, your talents as a streamer, podcaster. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show and getting to know you a bit better beyond the Twitter handle, because there's only so much you can tell from somebody's Twitter handle, and now I have a very full picture of who you are, and I hope in the future, when you do come back, we can actually talk about Mass Effect, because that's another thing that we need to talk about that we didn't get to. That's insane to me. You have an N7 shirt right there staring in my face, but we never got around to talking about that game. So I think it's just brilliant, to have somebody like you here and talking about your passions. I just want to say, thank you for that. Thank you for enriching our lives.
Oh, thank you, Alex. I love this show. I love your interview style, and the guests you've had have been phenomenal. I'm happy to come back anytime and talk about Mass Effect. We'll have to have you on the Mass Effect podcast at some point, obviously.
Yes.
Hopefully, you liked Andromeda enough to want to talk about it, because that's where we're headed next.
Look, I'm one of the few people who still liked Andromeda, okay? Like, I was in a very short, like, Mass Effect kind of video thing, and people made fun of me for liking Andromeda. I'm like, sue me. I love Mass Effect. You can't, even though that game was janky,
Perfect.
I still loved that game, warts and all,
Perfect. And we'll definitely reach out to you when we start booking for the Andromeda season. Hell yes. But
yes.
Thank you for your kind words. This has been a delight. I appreciate the community you've created, and the way you interview people is really just, you make people feel welcome. And thank you for that. Thank you for making me feel special, because just like any other creator, we don't always feel special, and it's hard to sometimes when we're working hard. And I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I had a blast being here. I'll come back whenever you like, and thank you for taking the time to chat with me. This has been great.
Absolutely. Let people know where people can find you and stuff. Like, this is the important part of this show.
The plugging part. All right, folks, buckle in. It's going to be a while. I'll see you in 10 minutes. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to keep it brief. The best place to find me is on Twitter, DJ_Stormageddon. I am more active there than anywhere else, but I am also DJ_Stormageddon on Twitter. As I said, I'm on that on Tumblr. I'm that on Instagram. I'm that on Twitch, all DJ_Stormageddon. If you want to find any of the podcasts I work on, the merch I sell, my Ko-fi, all the things I produce, my Twitch stream, you can go to djstormageddon.com. No underscore there. It's just www.djstormageddon.com. You will go to my streamer links page that literally has everything that I do. And I would love that you go check it out. If you listen to this episode and you want to comment or question on anything we've talked about, please at me on Twitter. My DMs are open. Would love to chat with you. Come find me. I am way too online all the time, so I'll be easy to find.
As with most people. Again, thank you, Matt, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you. And of course, thank you to everybody who has listened or even watched the show. I know, we just started doing video podcasts recently on the brand new Backlog Battle Podcast YouTube channel. Go check it out. It's right there, so you can actually see what Matt looks like. He's great. He's handsome. He has the N7 shirt. He has that Fuser hat. You can only find that.
Gotta rep the brand.
Right. And you can only find those things, and Matt specifically, the Backlog Battle Podcast YouTube channel, which, is connected to the Backlog Battle channel on youtube.com/Backlog Battle. And of course, every new episode of the podcast comes out at midnight Pacific time on Wednesday without fail. So far, we have had an episode every single week since we came back in February. That's never going to change. So even through holidays, even when I'm not working, you're still going to get something special. So till next Wednesday, we'll see you guys next week, and happy gaming.